Hello everyone, and welcome to our first session in our crash course on political discourse series on activism and campaigning. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to launch our series of online workshops. So thanks for joining us for this first one. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our organisation for people who aren't that familiar with it. So YouthPolitics UK is an award-winning organisation. It's non-partisan and not-for-profit, and we're dedicated to engaging young people with politics and empowering them to use their voices in public spaces and combating political apathy. So we've got a strong history in campaigning. So we did our On My Mind campaign back in 2018, which we'll tell you a little bit more about throughout the rest of the session. And we've also worked with external campaign groups such as 50/50 Parliament and Amnesty International, and you can find out more about our campaigns in our website, which is in the link in the chat. So first of all, this workshop will be recorded, just letting everyone know about that. And if you want to know how to ask a question, and to remember, if you want to know how to ask a question, please just check the chat below. So my name's Alice. Hello, I do community outreach for YP UK, and I'll let Safa introduce herself.
Hi guys, I'm Safa and I'm head of events at YouthPolitics UK.
Fab. So we're really excited to run this workshop for you today. And to start off with, we are going to run a poll on what issue is a top priority for you guys to campaign on. So let us know, you can see the poll, what's important to you. Is it anti-racism? Is it climate change? Is it mental health? Is it youth voice? Or is it something else? And if it's something else, please tell us about it in the Q&A. So feel free to fill that out, and then we'll move on to Safa to tell us more about what activism actually is.
Yeah, and we'll be revealing the results of the poll at the end of the session, and hopefully, the result that we get will inform us onto what issues we'll be campaigning about in the future. Okay, so first of all, we'll start with just explaining what political activism is. So we are defining political activists as people who get involved with the political process for the sake of promoting, impeding, or raising awareness about a certain issue or a set of issues. So you can be campaigning for something, or you can be campaigning against something. And you do this by mobilizing people, raising support, and especially trying to change it through institutions in our politics and through engaging with people who are in power. Political activism involves engagement beyond just voting, whether it is through protest, signing petitions, or leafleting. There are actually a myriad of ways to get involved in political activism, and this can be small scale, like just within your school or university, or it can be on a larger scale, such as national or international. Political activism can just involve, raising awareness about issues and changing perspectives in your social circle, throughout your family. So it can take a lot of forms.
Cool. So this was YouthPolitics UK's On My Mind campaign, which was launched in 2018 with the view to trying to secure more funding for youth mental health services in the UK. So we're going to talk a bit more throughout the rest of the slides about how the On My Mind campaign was run, both in terms of online and in-person activism, and to show you the kind of steps that tend to happen in a campaign such as this.
So, we'll be taking you through the first step in activism. So, activism in person can involve many different ways. So, first of all, through protest. You can find information about protests on social media. So, that's a really good way to connect your online activism with your activism in person. And if you just bring a banner, make a sign, something like that, and take it along to a protest, obviously during this time of COVID-19, if you're joining any protests, it's really important that you wear face masks and try to stay safe. But as we've seen during this pandemic, injustice and inequality, etc., these things don't stop for pandemics. So that's why protests haven't stopped either. Protests, strikes and demonstrations are actually really powerful. A lot of people do say that protests don't work and they don't really do anything. But obviously we've seen how wrong this is. It's been so clear just from the A-level protests that happened earlier this week. And that changed the government's mind and it created that U-turn. So it's really important that we do engage in protests because they actually say a lot. And what you'll see is that young people are often accused of being apathetic and not engaged in politics. And maybe, you know, through voting, people have seen that they're not as engaged in more conventional forms of politics, but they're actually really engaged in activism such as protesting. And that, whilst it's not, you know, the most conventional way, such as voting and door knocking, getting involved in party politics, it shows that they do have issues that they care about, but they're just not seeing themselves represented in the traditional form of politics that we have. And that's why protests are so good to demonstrate the feelings of young people. The climate strikes earlier last year were a big example of an issue that's close to the heart of young people, and it made the UK government declare a climate emergency. So it shows that, you know, if we protest, this is the way that we can get our voices heard and show that we do care about changing the system, and that the current political system we have isn't necessarily representing our voices and our opinions. Another way of getting involved in activism in person is through leafleting and door knocking. And this is something you will usually do if you're a part of a group, such as a local group, a political party. And these are especially useful for for local issues and local campaigns, and they can do a lot. And often, you know, you might get a bit of negative reception through people who don't want you at their doorstep, but it can actually be a really good way to engage with people. And most people are polite and they will listen to you, especially if you're campaigning for a local campaign that maybe a lot of people in your area are worried about. Another way is to campaign in public spaces. So if you are with a local group or have set up a local campaign, you can campaign in spaces such as, you know, your local town centre, even Manchester city centre. Those kind of places are a really good way. You'll always find people there campaigning for issues, and they often get a good amount of engagement. So it's a useful way just to, you know, hand out leaflets, get people to know about your cause. The more people that know about your cause, the more successful your campaign will be. And so it's really important. And even if you've gone to a conference, for example, a party conference or any other conference that engages with politics or the issue you're campaigning about, if you set up a stall there, then people who are interested in your issue and in your topic that you're campaigning about, those people, the relevant people, will come and speak to you. And often if there are keynote speakers and, you know, powerful people who are speaking at the conference, they'll visit you as well. So your campaign will become more high profile.
So in addition to in-person activism, you also have the option to do online activism. So there's all sorts of ways you can do this. It's such a good opportunity to really get the word out there about things that you care about, either a campaign you're running yourself or a campaign you're involved with. So first of all, we have social media, where you can raise awareness of issues and gather support for your cause from people all over the world, right? So, you know, post, retweet, share, and even if you only have a relatively small following on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, whatever it may be, chances are there's someone that follows you that has a bigger following, right? So if you have 200 followers, maybe one of those 200 has 1,000. They like what you see, they agree with your cause, or you've persuaded them that this thing is important. So then they repost whatever you've posted, and that reaches their 1,000 followers. So there really is this kind of ripple effect in terms of raising awareness and getting support that you can get even if you only have a relatively small social media following. And I always think that even if you just change one person's mind through a post, like that one person's mind is still changed. It's still a positive change that you've made. So it's always worth doing, definitely. And then another good thing you can do online is by signing petitions. So you can do these through change.org or parliament.co.uk, and after 10,000 signatures, petitions get a response from the government, and after 100,000, petitions are considered for a debate in Parliament. I feel like 100,000 can sound like a lot, but there's like 60 odd million people living in the UK. So, chances are there will be 100,000 if you can get the word out that will agree with your cause, or maybe you'll be able to change people's minds through social media. So petitions are definitely worth signing. You can also donate to causes online. This can be really helpful because often the reason why campaigns kind of tend to start to falter is due to lack of funds. So even if you've only got a tiny amount, a few quid is better than nothing, and that accumulated can really help a campaign get the word out even further and get to where they need to be. So that's a really good thing to do. Second of all, contacting people in power. Contact your MP, contact local councillors and local businesses. If there's an issue you care about, then write to your MP about it. Particularly, like, even if you're not of voting age yet, they're aware that relatively soon you will be, right? So if they get the sense that that's something that young people care about and the youth vote is something they want, there is a very good chance that they will at least take notice. And I also think that for the most part, a lot of politicians do want to do their best for people. So if you persuade them that this is an important issue that affects a lot of people or affects people in a really deep way, like chances are, they are going to want to try and do something about it. So it's definitely worth doing, particularly local councillors in local areas as well. Like they obviously have a smaller constituency and area to deal with, so they're even more likely to be able to take notice of particularly local issues and be able to make a difference. I remember a couple of years ago, a year ago, when the climate strikes were going on, a couple of local councils pledged to be carbon neutral, like in years before the government are planning to do so. So, it's definitely an opportunity to make a change within your local area. And when other areas see that these places have made change, they'll go, well, we can do it too. It's lead by example. So that's a really good opportunity to do that. And linking in with in-person activism, social media is a great place to find out about protests to go to, about strikes that are going on that you can get involved with. So there's a really good link there, and it's a great opportunity to be able to join in bigger campaigns.
Also, just want to add that I think social media activism gets a lot of, is kind of perceived as not being that effective, and you've got this phrase clicktivism, which kind of says that social media activism is lazy and it doesn't do much, but it kind of denies the fact that many people won't be able to have the access to a lot of ways of activism. Maybe if you've got a local group that you want to join but you aren't able to because of time constraints, if it's too far away, if you haven't got the funds to make the transport there, this is a really accessible way for everyone to get involved in activism. So I think, if you aren't able to engage in other forms of activism that are more in person, it's fine, and it's actually amazing to do online activism because it actually does make a difference. And I know personally I've learned a lot from things that my peers have posted online, and these are things that I wouldn't have known about if it weren't for social media, and I think that's the beauty of it. And also, just thinking it to On My Mind, we actually worked with the organisation of Manchester Matters, and we produced a video about YouthPolitics UK and the On My Mind campaign, and that went out on their website. We also received online endorsement from Alistair Campbell and James Cathcart, and our head of campaigns emailed other organisations to suggest partnerships. So if you built up your own campaign, then online it's a really good way to connect with other groups and other people and collaborate, because obviously you won't have the time to go to individual meetings, especially during this pandemic. So it's a really, really good platform to just connect with people. Almost everything is online these days, and technology is the future, so it's important that we utilize it to further our campaigns.
So, yeah, no, Safa is absolutely right. Like, don't waste any opportunity. Like, social media definitely gets a bad rap, but I think we've explained to you like why it can actually be really effective. So another form of activism we're going to talk about is party activism. So if you feel a particular political party is really strong on an issue that you really care about, then it can be great to join them and campaign for them. You have to be over 14 to join most parties. But most parties have things like youth wings and youth meetings in a lot of areas, so it can definitely be worth looking into that. So yeah, find a political party that you think really represents what you care about, if there's a particular issue or a multitude of issues, and get involved with them. Like, parties will run events and conferences and online meetings, and that's a really good opportunity to meet people who might care about a similar issue, or to find people within the party who can discuss that issue with, if they're higher up, and maybe talk to them about, what you'd like to see them do in terms of that issue should they get into government. That's a really good opportunity to meet like elected representatives and like important people within the party. Like, don't be afraid to bend people's ears. If you're talking to them, tell them what you care about. Don't be afraid that you're a young person, that they won't listen to you, because for the most part, if you present your argument well, and you tell people what it is you care about, then they will listen to you, and maybe they'll take it under advisement, because like I said, parties are aware that young people are either have just become voters or will be in the near future. So I think they are like quite tuned into what it is young people care about, and relatively willing to act on that if enough people make a stand about it. So yeah, join their local national campaigns. That's another example of like in-person activism. You can leaflet for them when elections come up, and just make sure that they really like stick to any pledges they make about causes that are important to you in any way you can.
Yeah, and also if you develop a rapport with people who are high up in political parties, and that can help your cause, if they've got a good relationship with you, then they are so much more likely to listen to you if they respect you. And so if you represent young people from them respecting you, then you will be able to like get yourself heard a lot more. So with speeches, conferences and events, so when you go to places like conferences, whether it be party conferences or other conferences such as, there are climate change events, just these kind of things. And if you're looking to link your online activism and your in-person activism, it can be really useful to, take photos. If you take photos of where you are, what you're doing with senior politicians, people in power, if you find them, you post them, maybe you'll interact with them online as well, you will gain a profile. And once you've gained a profile, people are going to listen to you, and people are going to know, like, they'll flag you up, they'll remember you in their head, especially if you're like a member of a party. People will remember who you are, and they'll know that they should listen to you because you've expressed your argument well and you're really passionate. And they can be really informative as well. If you go to seminars and workshops, such as the one we're holding right now, it can inform you a lot on how to pursue your issue further. And you can also meet like-minded people as well. You can gather support through events such as these. Obviously, there aren't many events going on right now in person, but when things start up again, then this is a good opportunity for you to kind of connect and further your campaign. And even with things like workshops online and on Zoom and conferences, those are still good places to connect with people and get their social media, and that will kind of just get more attention for your cause. And also, as we mentioned On My Mind, we used the conference that we set up as YouthPolitics UK in 2018, which was a conference aimed towards young people. We had lots of people come in and engage with our workshops and our event, and it was an amazing event with Alistair Campbell as our keynote speaker, and that's where we got an opportunity for our campaign to be known to him. And so our head of campaigns, Amy, she spoke about the campaign with him, and she also spoke to other organisations that were at our conference running stalls, organisations such as Amnesty International and Greenpeace. So you're able to talk to across a wide range of campaigns, really. You know, if you get more and more involved, you'll find that, you know, people who are mainly campaigning for environmental changes, or people who are mainly campaigning for human rights, you'll find that a lot of these people are, you know, like-minded, and they just want to make a change like you. And so even if they are from a different campaign to one that you're focusing on, you'll often still have their support, and it's just a matter of attending these things and, you know, making sure that you don't get too intimidated just because, you know, it is a lot of people. And often if you're going to things like, you know, party meetings, local or any other, you know, local group meetings, you might find that it's overwhelmingly attended by older people. You might be the only young person there. So it's important that you're able to be confident enough to represent the views of young people, because they are badly needed. In places where it's overwhelmingly dominated by older people, young people simply don't have a voice unless you go there to give that voice. So it's really important that you do that. And when you do that, you are making such a big change. So yeah.
Absolutely. So another way to get your voice heard is through pressure groups, voluntary organisations and charities. For example, YouthPolitics UK. So often you can find like non-partisan voluntary groups, and they can often be a fair bit more effective than parties because they're focused on a few goals. So if there's something really specific that's important to you, particularly if you don't feel like any of the political parties are that strong on it, then it can be really helpful to join a voluntary organisation, a pressure group or a charity, and many will have like a specific youth wing, particularly some of the bigger organisations. So meetings, often like these groups will hold meetings. Manchester has a lot of charities, voluntary groups, and it can be intimidating, but it's like Safa said, you just have to go. It's so important that you get your voice heard. And like everyone has to start somewhere, right? And at the end of the day, I don't think it's the case that when you walk in the room as a young person, people feel particularly judgmental or anything like that. I think for the most part, particularly voluntary organisations are delighted to see a new member, particularly if that person's a young person and there's not many young people in the organisation. I think organisations always appreciate getting a youth perspective and more support. So definitely don't feel too nervous about going to meetings, particularly Zoom meetings, as Safa said, like they tend to be less intimidating because for the first meeting, you can just kind of mute yourself and sit there and listen to what people have to say. But if you want to speak, brilliant. And, you know, you can build up your confidence as the meetings go along, but it's so important that you go and listen to what people have to say and get people to hear what you have to say, even more importantly, and get your voice heard on the issue. Like, how do you think they can better campaign for that issue? Do you think that they're doing that they're promoting it in the most effective way? Like there's so many things you can do to help manpower, brain power, everything. So please get your voice heard in these areas. Obviously, like I said, YouthPolitics UK is an example of this, right? It's so easy to get involved with us through our website, which is on the chat. Our social networks, please sign up to our newsletter on our website. And there's so many ways you can get involved with us. You know, we're building up our campaign wing again. You can write articles for us, opinion articles, to try and like change people's minds about an issue you care about, and these are often promoted on social media. So that's a really good way of getting your opinion and your arguments out about an issue that you really care about. So please, if that's something you would like to do, please get in touch with our articles team, and I think you can find out how to do that through the link in the chat. We did this with On My Mind as well. Our campaign leader got in touch with the 3 Million, which is an organisation that represents EU citizens living in the UK, to talk about collaboration in our campaigns. There's lots of really good ways that you can get involved with voluntary organisations, so please do so.
Yeah, and it's just like how Alice said, older people who dominate voluntary organisations or political parties or any groups that you're part of, they're often really pleased to see young people like joining in with their campaign, and even they're often trying to recruit more young people because they want to represent us more. And there have been like times where people have thought I was a lot older, not because I look older, but because they just don't expect young people to join their campaign. So it's like time we start changing minds and get more involved with these groups, so that we become more representative, and everyone is usually really welcoming to young people joining. And once you expand, there are often like youth wings and things of big organizations such as Friends of the Earth. You'll find youth wings of organizations like that because they've been able to mobilize more young people. So keep attending those meetings and getting your voice heard, and then you can attract more of your friends and your peers and other young people to the group. And that will, make it in general more representative and lead the way for young people in the future to be able to enter it, because then they won't see it as a group that's quite exclusive and not very accessible to them.
Absolutely. And also with certain issues, there tend to be like aspects of those issues that specifically affect young people. And if the organisation is dominated by older people, out of no spite or malice whatsoever, but if you're not a young person, sometimes it doesn't necessarily occur to you what specific impacts something might have on younger people. So your voice is really important in those kinds of areas, to discuss like the specific implications for such a big group in society of which you are part. So that's it's really important in that regard as well.
So youth councils and school councils are a really good way to make a more direct impact on a smaller scale. So all councils should have a local youth councils that you can join, and this is an amazing place where you can get your voice heard. I was part of my local youth council for 5 years, and I had endless opportunities there. It was amazing. I went to so many events related to, there were so many opportunities to go to different events. I was more interested in, for example, the ones that were about healthcare and mental health services and healthcare services in general aimed towards young people. And NHS kept visiting us, and we kept going to events to them where we could tell them how we wanted the issues that we had with our treatment and how we wanted things to change directly. And there were so many opportunities to get involved in different so we had people from like local sexual health services visiting. There were people from the fire service, the police service. Everyone was coming to us to ask us what we wanted to change. So this is actually an amazing place to have a direct impact. In Manchester, for example, the Hour Pass, free bus travel for 16 to 18-year-olds, was created through the local youth councils, the 10 of them in Greater Manchester, all meeting together to with Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester. That was how we had our impact, and it was through local youth councils that we were able to get a free bus pass and many more opportunities, because we joined that youth council. And there were opportunities also to represent young people on a wider platform through the local youth council. For example, you can run to be a member of Youth Parliament, which is an amazing opportunity. You get to debate in the Houses of Parliament for an issue, a nationwide campaign. And you also can get an opportunity to go on the Parliamentary Youth Select Committee. So, youth councils are actually an incredible way to get your voice heard. And I've definitely had an amazing experience there. And you get to meet so many people who go on to do amazing things. Like people from my youth council have set up, a mental health charity, for example. And you can see that, like, the local youth council, like, get that experience of going there and getting all their opportunities really did help them, pursue their campaign later in life as well. So I'd really encourage you to all join one. A school council is also an amazing way to get a change done directly in your school, because obviously it's a lot easier. It's the most direct way to, talk to your teachers and get them to change something. And some people might think that, changing something in your school is, too small and not really worth considering. But that's not really true. So, for example, there's been like a petition recently to, get a more diverse curriculum into secondary schools to teach, more of a diverse history. And, this can take a long time, because first of all, the government has to debate it, they have to pass it, which they might not, and it will also take years to actually establish the new campaign and implement the new curriculum and then implement it. So this could take years, and you might be out of school before that happens. But if you're able to talk to your teachers and just to get them to do more lessons on it, even just form times and assemblies, if you are able to get that done, then what you're doing is you're educating hundreds of people where they might not have been educated. And through that, if you've got a part of your school council and your local youth council, for example, you can say in your youth council that your school has done this to be more plastic free, for example, and then that can be shared through people who go to other schools. And so you're having an impact throughout different schools as well, if you're able to change what's happening in your own school. So it's important not to ignore this kind of activism, because it can have a knock-on effect. And even if you are just having a small effect on a few people, that's amazing. Like, you have done a big thing. So we shouldn't ignore these types of activism. And if you're a university student, universities also have so many opportunities to get involved in campaigns, and these can be university specific or they can be wider campaigns. But there are so many groups and youth societies to help you, and you can obviously find so many people there who will join your campaign and will campaign for it too. So we encourage you to go through all the methods and take all the opportunities.
All right, so let's talk about staying positive. I think that everyone finds it really hard from time to time to stay positive about their activism and the world in general. Like, I know at the moment when I'm, looking at my own activism and all of this, that you look at the world sometimes and it's just so hard to be positive, but it is possible and you can make change. So we're going to talk through some tips on just remembering that you can actually make a difference, and nothing's really as awful as it seems that it is. So first of all, I think a good piece of advice is to set goals. Be clear with yourself about exactly what you want to achieve in a particular time frame, because I think this can help you feel a sense of achievement and realize that you have actually done quite a lot when, say, you finish the first year of a campaign or the first year of a particular piece of activism. You're not just looking back and feeling like, oh, I've not done anything. Whereas if you've set out specific goals and you've achieved X, Y, and Z of them, then it can be easier to feel like you have actually achieved something, because you probably have. And then it'll be easy to then go on to the second year and set maybe higher goals and build on those goals that you've set in first year. It also helps with things like staying focused, and like actually having a direction that you want your campaign to go in. This is particularly important if you're running your own campaign. Be really clear about what it is exactly you want to achieve, how and when. And this is helpful as well in terms of gathering support, because it's clear to potential supporters what it is they're signing up to, what kind of things they'd be doing if they were supporting you, as well as for anyone who might be listening to you in Parliament, etc. So this can be a really important thing to make clear both to yourself and to others. Second of all, it's a fairly obvious piece of advice, but it is really important. Be resilient. Often you're going to fail the first time round, because we all do. Everybody fails, everybody makes mistakes. It's just what happens. But just be resilient. Try not to let it get you down too much. There is almost always more than one route to achieving your goal, as we saw with the Dakota Access Pipeline protesters. Their original protest back in, I think it was 2017, didn't stop the pipeline being built, but more recently they've sued, and that is helping to potentially get the pipeline shut down. The case is ongoing. But yeah, there is almost always more than one route to achieving your goals. So if the first one doesn't work out, start thinking about how else you might achieve what it is you want to achieve. Also remember that smaller changes can lead to bigger ones. Don't be disheartened if you feel like you're not like changing the world in the first year. Even if you've only changed a small thing, like Safa was talking about, even if you've only changed something within your school, it might feel like a small change, but that small change can lead to a much bigger one, because it can set an example, say, for other schools, for councils. When one council or one school or one local authority does something, it sets an example for other councils and other schools, and they realize, okay, well, this is how this school did it. It's actually been very successful. It's not had these problems that, you know, we thought it might do when we were brainstorming, so we can actually implement it. It's definitely helpful, and it helps people who are trying to make the argument for the change point to an example of a time the change has been successful. So there can be a serious ripple effect from a smaller change to a bigger one. And remember that you can make a difference. Put it up on a post-it note next to your bed. Just keep it in your head that you can make a change. Even small changes are better than no changes. And like we said, small changes often lead to bigger ones. So try not to be disheartened. And remember that your activism can make a serious difference to people's lives. So please do keep that in mind when you're trying to stay positive.
And the most recent example of this has been the A-level protests, which, like, you know,
yes.
is an amazing example of what young people can do. So young people took to the streets, protested. We, on social media, we took all the routes of activism that there is, and we were able to get a knock-on impact. So don't let anyone tell you that protesting and activism doesn't work, because we've had an amazing recent example that it absolutely does. And we forced the government to make a complete U-turn because they had to admit that we were right. So, you know, these are amazing examples that you simply cannot ignore. And so obviously more examples. This PowerPoint was created before the A-level protests went through, so otherwise we would have had that on a bullet point as well, because it is an incredible example of like a direct change that was made. We've already talked about the Dakota Access Pipeline and how an environmental review is now being pursued. And recently we've also seen a lot of Black Lives Matter protests. And what that has done is, you know, in the USA, a lot of police officers have been arrested and laws against police brutality have been passed as a result of this. In the UK, we've seen statues of racist figures being removed, and a lot of institutions and groups such as the media, schools, etc., they're all looking at you know, race issues, and they're all paying attention to it more. Prior to when Black Lives Matter, you know, really sparked up again this year, a lot of people would claim that they were colourblind, which meant that, you know, they would proceed to ignore all race issues on the pretext that everyone was already equal. But what we've achieved through Black Lives Matter is to show that, you know, you can't ignore race issues, and so people aren't ignoring it. And you know, shows such as Little Britain has been taken down because, you know, they've been racist. And so this movement has caused a change, and I'm sure it will continue to change many things, because there's obviously still a lot to be done. Also, the Extinction Rebellion and climate strikes were effective as well. We've spoken about this already, local councils changing, and you know, the UK declaring an climate emergency. I just think that, you know, climate change is on the agenda so much more nowadays than it was before, and this is the result of all the protests and the strikes. In the general election, there was a climate-based party debate. So, you know, this is not the kind of thing that would have been happening in 2015 or even 2017, but we have raised it to the top of the political agenda, and that is really important. So even if you haven't seen so as much of a direct, you know, impact and direct changes, the fact that we've raised it to the top of the political agenda, it shows that, you know, they can't ignore it. And, you know, parties made a lot of pledges on climate change that they simply would not have done if we didn't make so much noise. And so, you know, continue making noise all the time, because in the end you will see a change. It's not like people weren't campaigning about, you know, anti-racism and climate change before. That's not true, they were, but because they've continued, that's why it's changed. These weren't, you know, events that just happen in a single year. It's because we've been campaigning for so long, and you know, every year we're increasing the momentum of the campaigns, that we've been able to get things done. So it might take time, but you will achieve things in the end. And all the you know, things that we've achieved in the last years, you know, the civil rights movement, Stonewall, all of these things, these were protests, and they, like, you know, created such big changes that wouldn't have been even, you couldn't even imagine of these changes like before they actually happened. So we have to keep hope, because protest is one of the biggest ways to creating societal change. And I believe that, you know, activism comes and then government laws and legislation follows. Activism comes and changes society, and then government laws change in response to that. So this is the way to change.
So our final piece of advice really is to take every opportunity you get to put forward the issues that you care about, whether it's climate change, whether it's mental health, whether it's anti-racism, whether it's all of the above, right? Take every opportunity you can that you care about. If you meet someone with power, ask them if you could have work experience. Use that as a springboard to get these issues into the public eye and into the places that matter. Apply for every role and every election that you can in youth wings, in youth organisations, and even in non-youth organisations. If they don't have age limits, just apply. You know, back in, I think it was 2018, we had the 14-year-olds running for state government in Vermont and a few other places in America. So there really is like no age limit on getting involved in politics. Take every opportunity that you can and be ambitious. There is no harm and certainly no shame in failing. Like we said, as long as you have the ability to pick yourself back up again and realize that failure is absolutely not the end of the world, then you can just try again, and, you know, you'll probably succeed the second, the third, or maybe even the fourth time, but it is always worth a second try.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of our session, and we'll be following with a Q&A after this, but just before that, we'll reveal the results of the poll we did. So we can see that anti-racism is the winner here, with Youth Voice coming in second. So we'll try to, you know, focus our campaigns and our collaborations on anti-racism, which is obviously like such a big issue and has really been put forward into the spotlight recently over the past month. So now I think we'll move on to the Q&A.
So the first question is from Martha. How do I promote my political campaign / product on social media without being too pushy about it? This is a really good question. All right, so I would say what constitutes pushy is probably quite a personal choice at the end of the day. But what I would say is, make posts, right? Because at the end of the day, things like posts, things like stories, if people don't like it, they can just unfollow you, right? You know, people follow you because they want to see what you post on your social media, and what comes under that is anything from pictures of your food to issues that you really care about and you want to let them know about. So I wouldn't really worry about being too pushy, even if the people who follow you think might be kind of opposed to your views. Even someone who disagrees with you doesn't necessarily not want to see your content on their feed, right? They might disagree with you, they might argue with you in the comments, or they might even read what you have to say, think about it, and you might even change their mind. So I think particularly if you're aware that your followers are somewhat opposed to you on a particular issue, it's actually really important to get your argument out there and tell them about why it is that this issue is so important, why it is that your stance on this issue is the correct one and the one that's going to benefit the most amount of people in the best way. So I feel like pushiness isn't too much of an issue, because the nature of social media is that you see whatever the people you follow post. They've signed up to see you post whatever you're going to post. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But like we always say, is that your mental health comes first. So if you feel like your posting on social media is having a really negative impact on your mental health, then my advice really would be to take a break from that a little bit, just to ensure that you can be the best activist you can be and you're the healthiest you can be.
Our next question is from Bree from Kent. They ask, how do I find campaigning organisation to do this with? So I think online is your best tool. So if you've got an issue that you're concerned about, just look it up and you'll find, results from groups that exist. So for example, if you're worried about climate change, if you just look that up, you'll find things like, your local Friends of the Earth. So, just use social media online, those are your best tools. But also if you go to things, workshops such as these and other events and seminars that you're interested in, you'll find that there are people from different organizations involved, maybe that you didn't know about. And so if you just get more informed about all of these different things, and you can ask around your peers, people then you'll be able to find more information about campaigns that you're more interested in.
Our next question is from Angelica, and she would like to ask it live. I'll sort that out now.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how would you deal with complete activism burnout? Because with all the issues that were going on everywhere in the world, even though I just took part in social media activism, by the end, a couple of weeks in, I just felt so tired of it, but also just guilty for not keeping up to it and not feeling as emotionally involved. So how do you deal with activism burnout as well as guilt that comes with it?
That's absolutely understandable, and I think a great question. So my first piece of advice would be to remember that often guilt about feeling exhausted from talking about really heavy issues isn't necessarily helpful and or warranted. Obviously that's how you feel, but I think a helpful way to deal with feelings of guilt from taking a break would be to remember that you need that break in order to continue being a good activist. Because if you keep going on despite feeling exhausted and emotionally really drained and all of this, then ultimately you're just going to get to a point where you just can't keep going with activism anymore. So I think it's really helpful to remember when you do start experiencing those feelings of guilt, to remember that, look, I need this break in order to continue helping people and to help myself, because you are also important. So keep that in mind. And with regards to dealing with activism burnout, it sounds like you did the right thing by taking a bit of a break. And it can also help if you're involved in a campaign and you're feeling really tired and burnt out. If you've got a really good team around you that you can delegate some tasks to take a few days or a week off, that can be really helpful if you're involved in running a campaign, to have a really good team of people you trust behind you to help you out when you feel like you can't keep going for the next few days.
So our next question is asked by Andrew, and it's asking, what is the most effective way to have a detailed written proposal considered by a government department such as the FCO, which I think refers to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office? So that's a really good question. Obviously that's quite a high level to take your activism to. I think, getting it noticed by people in power is the most important thing here. So it also might help if you are part of a respected and well-known organisation. If you are part of that and you've got your voice heard within that group, then you can work with them to create a proposal. And if they put that to the government, if they are more well known, they are more likely to be heard. But also if you just send it to as many MPs, people like that, you know, maybe not just your local MPs, but you know, people, if you've got, you know, the head of the foreign affairs, things like that, if you're able to connect with those kind of people, then you'll be able to get your proposal noticed.
So next of all, we have a question from Fabian. And the question is, how do you inspire confidence in yourself to push and be an activist? I think this is a question that's probably has personally different answers to other people. But I think the main thing I would say is that really try and find an issue that makes you feel really passionate, that makes you emotional when you hear about it. Find something that you just really, really care about. And I think from that initial emotional connection, if you hear about something going on and saying, this is just so wrong, if it really inspires an impact in you, I think that can be something that really helps you push on through hard times with your activism, helps you deal with things like activism burnout in relation to the question asked before. You know, I think the main thing is about finding something that you really care about. And it can also be helpful, like we've been discussing throughout the rest of this session, is to find other people who are passionate about the same thing, because then that can help get yourself even more inspired. And if they're doing things that are really helpful, they're like getting in contact with people, they're running campaigns, then that can be something that inspires you to push your activism to the next level. So I would say, to summarize, something you really, really care about and are passionate about, and surround yourself with the right people.
Our next question comes from Zara, I think. So they are asking, how do I spread my political views without joining an organisation? And you know, it's really easy to spread your political views without joining an organisation. It's not always easy to get involved in organisations and their meetings, especially if you're limited by constraints such as age, or, you know, where you live. If you live in like a rural community, you might not have as many provisions. So there are lots of ways, especially online. I think that is the biggest way for you to be able to spread your views and get your voice heard. And I think because of the pandemic, a lot of organizations have been trying to connect with people online more. And I think even after the pandemic, that will continue. So that is probably the best solution. But as I've said before, things like, you know, your school councils and youth councils, they will kind of give you a path to opportunities that you might not be able to have otherwise. So I think if you join those, you know, smaller groups and smaller councils that you are able to join, then you'll find yourself with more opportunities because you've made that first step. So if you can't but if you can't do that either, then obviously just you can keep your activism online, and that is still a really effective way to do it.
Yeah, so our last question, I think, is from Blue, and they have asked basically about how to tell between how to distinguish whether you not wanting to do some form of activism is coming from a place of not wanting to unlearn certain things or deal with things yourself, or whether it's coming from a place of the fact that you're just burned out. And they've also asked about how to balance sort of horrible things that are happening with being aware. So first of all, how to tell where sort of reluctance to continue with activism might be going on. I think with something like this, I think it's normally the case that you kind of know deep down. Like when you sit down, ask yourself, how do I feel, right? And if you're just feeling really miserable, if you're upset, or if you're really tired, then I think that's a fairly good indication that like the reason you don't want to do something is because you're just emotionally exhausted. And I don't really think that there's anything wrong with that at all. And, you know, be kind to yourself. Like listen to how you're feeling, and if that's how you feel, don't try and rationalize it by saying, oh, it's just because I don't want to unlearn things, it's just because I don't want to do this. Be kind to yourself and be like, this is how I'm feeling now. In 2 days, or however many days, I'll revisit and I'll learn about this thing. I'll tackle this difficult topic in my learning and my growing. Set yourself a day, or if you feel better another day, then say, okay, I'm gonna do this today. It's a difficult topic, but I'm gonna do that today. So just be kind to yourself and somewhat limit your intake of bad news. So this is in response to the second part of the question, is that while it is very important to stay aware, staying aware doesn't mean scrolling through your news feed and Twitter 24 hours a day looking for the latest developments as they happen, because anyone who does that, I think, will just end up being completely miserable. I know when I do that, I just want to curl up and cry. So I think one of the activists in the session we had a couple of weeks ago said something along the lines of, it can be really helpful to set yourself a time each day where you're going to read the news, and you're going to look at what's going on, maybe feel kind of sad about it, you're going to consume bad news, so maybe set yourself some time in the morning. If you don't want to start your day like that, maybe set it in the evening or the middle of the day. So set yourself an allotted amount of time that you're going to read the news. I personally found that a helpful piece of advice.
And I think we're just going to wrap it up with one last question, which we can both answer, from Ben in Manchester. They've asked, what is the most rewarding moment you've had from your activism so far? I think the most rewarding moments that I've had are when you've kind of inspired, younger people than you to, be passionate about the same things you've been passionate about. So, for example, I was part of my local youth council for 5 years, and I was a really passionate and active member of that. But when I left, it was really inspiring to see, people who were the same age as I was when I joined, like 12, 13, 14, that people of those kind of ages also being really passionate. It's really inspiring to see how, every generation is, getting more involved and getting more engaged. And also when I see that, people who when I didn't get opportunities to get to access, ways of activism, seeing that people, young people have those opportunities now, and people have been setting up more things to get young people involved. That's really inspired me. Things like YouthPolitics UK, which, when I was at 12, 13, didn't exist then. Platforms such as these, which are now cropping up, it's really, motivating and inspiring to see that, people are, setting these things up because we do care about young people.
I think for me, the most rewarding moment was, so at the moment I'm working on widening participation and access to debating throughout the UK, and I've been working on making workshops to teach teachers about debating and teach them how to coach debating. And when I put this to some of the students involved in debating at my university, I thought it would be met with kind of, you're going to make us do this, but everyone was just so keen to get involved and so keen to help people in from lower socioeconomic backgrounds throughout the country, particularly in the north of England, get more involved in debating, because we've all found it such a rewarding experience. And the fact that all these people were just so keen to get involved and to help out with this issue that was really important to me and actually try and make a difference, I just found that really inspiring, because it wasn't the response I expected, and it just showed that people really did care about others and about the issue that I cared about, and that really inspired me.
So I think we'll be coming to an end of our session now. Just to let you know that next week we're doing a workshop which is part of our series, our crash course in political discourse series, and it will be a session on debating and how to improve your debating skills. And that links in really well to campaigning, because once you're good at debating, then you can debate people who maybe oppose your issue. So if you're able to get better at debating, then you'll be able to pursue your campaign further. So please come along next week at the same time. There should be a link in the chat which will guide you to where you can join, register for next week's session. So make sure you grab your place before it fills up. If you're interested in Youth Politics UK and what we do, again, please check out our website and subscribe to our newsletter, which is on our website. You can also find on our website our socials. It's also on the chat, I think, our socials on Instagram and Twitter, where you can see what we do and get involved. And if you do want to get involved, then please send us an email as well. You'll find all of this information on this chat. And we're really glad you joined us. Thank you so much. We've enjoyed this session a lot, and we hope you did too. So see you next week.
Thank you very much, everyone.